Hey, this is Anthony of Elmore. I'm here to do a lecture. My lecture today is Introduction to the World's Greatest Black Buddhist Teacher, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. In the year 1891, there was a man in India. His name was Bhimrao Ambedkar. Bhimrao Ambedkar was what they would call, even though you may not like it, but he was what they would call the nigger in India. See, the nigger was the lowest person who you could be in the society among white people because they called us niggers. Well, in India, see, most of you do not know it, but racism actually began in India because what happened was there was the Africans of Asia who lived in present-day Pakistan and present-day India, and they had a very high society. And they created a religion called Hinduism. In this religion, they had what is called a sanctified racism. This sanctified racism was called caste. Caste comes from the word vana, which means color. Is that the lighter you are, the higher you are in the caste, like the Brahmins. And the darker you are, the lower you are put in this caste system. Now, what the Hindus did, they had all these different castes, and they had a caste that was so low that it was called the outcast. They said you didn't believe in that caste at all. Now, this was the worst condition that any human being could be in. Now, they were called the untouchables, and untouchable meant just that, untouchable. That means that you could not even walk on the shadow of an untouchable. See, this caste system in India was worse than anything that they had in America when it came to slavery, because you could at least, a slave could walk around. In the caste system, the untouchable could only come out at nighttime, and they could only wear clothes of dead people. They couldn't have regular clothes. They could not own anything. The only thing they could own was a dog and a donkey. And when they walked, they had to tie a broom on their ass, a broom. And they had to have a cup where they spit because their spit was considered unsanitary. Everything about them was considered unsanitary. If they look in the eyes of a Brahmin, their eyes could be cut out. If they heard any of the Brahmin teaching, molten iron was cut into their ears. If they ever said something, their tongue would be cut out. They had the most worst inhumanity against human beings in all of society, and this happened 1900 years ago when the white Kushan king Kanishka conquered India. These whites created the world's first racism and white supremacy, changing the Buddha from black to white. Genetic science placed the caste system 1900 years ago. Now, let me go back to 1891. In 1891, there was a young untouchable. His name was Bhimrao Ambedkar. At 9 years old in 1900, Dr. Ambedkar, he was not Dr. Ambedkar at the time, but Bhimrao Ambedkar went to a school, and they would not even let him study. He couldn't come into school. They made him sit in the back, and he could not sit in a chair. He had to bring bags and sacks to sit on. He could not drink the water because even drinking the water was polluting. And all of this, his life, this young man caught the hell that you could ever see in your life because he was discriminated against. But Dr. Ambedkar absorbed himself into education. And he studied and studied and studied. And by the time he got to graduate, I think it was the king of Burundi, who had offered him a scholarship. And so instead of going to school in London, he chose to go to school in America. And when he got to America, he found America to be a land of opportunity. And he studied social science and he studied law. And then he eventually went to London and he studied law. And this man raised himself up. He became what is called an enlightened human being. He was not a Buddhist at the time, but he had developed a sense of enlightenment. He wrote over 50 books, and he studied Buddhism. And now, he's born in 1891, I believe. Now, he studied Buddhism, he wrote books on Buddhism. And he made a commitment in life, and he says that I was born a Hindu, but I will not die a Hindu. Now they call them Dalits, they call them Nagas, they call them Chandelas, they call them slum dogs. There were different names, but they all were the same. They were the class in India who was treated poorly. Now, Dr. Ambedkar, by him being the brilliant scholar that he was the man who eventually wrote the Constitution of India. And in that Constitution, he made it illegal to discriminate. He, as a young man, he challenged the Hindu system. He challenged the current thinking. And he fought against oppression. And before his death, and he died in 1956, he says, I was born a Hindu, but I won't die a Hindu. And what Dr. Ambedkar did was he publicly converted to the Buddhist faith. But not only did he publicly convert to the Buddhist faith, but he wrote a Buddhist book and he studied the Buddhism. It was Dr. Ambedkar who understood the Hindu religion. He wrote many, many books, scholarly records about the Buddhist, about the Hindu faith, and how this religion discriminated and how this was an evil religion and that it discriminated against one group of people. It was Dr. Ambedkar who wrote the book on Buddhism, who wrote that the Buddha was the indigenous people of the day. It's Dr. Ambedkar who is the Buddhist scholar who went in the Indian language and he could study the books and he corrected all the ills about Buddhism. For example, in the SGI, it's called the Soka Gakkai International. Daisaki Kato wrote that the Buddha was Aryan. But it was Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar who wrote that the Buddha was a Dalit. He was from the indigenous people. He corrected the ills of Buddhism. Whereas in Japan, they extricated all of the blackness out of Buddhism. But it was Dr. Ambedkar and his Buddhism that actually corrected this. Now, Dr. Ambedkar was an individual who evolved. And when he died in 1956, he left a legacy because he was the man that brought Buddhism back to India. In an interview, Dr. Ambedkar said, "I will accept and follow the teachings of Buddha. I will keep my people away from the different opinions of Hinayana and Mahayana." Dr. Ambedkar rejected Theravada Buddhism, noting that it was a bunch of nonsense that Buddhist monks would escape society by living in the mountains doing meditation. He led India back to Buddhism. Now, it is up to us, the proud Black Buddhists, to follow the path of Dr. Ambedkar by us in America and by us in India joining together to teach the correct Buddhism. You see, Dr. Ambedkar wrote that the Buddhism of the Buddha has the capacity to change accordingly to times, a quality which no other religion can claim to have. See, we have our teacher who pointed the way. It is up to us to become enlightened people and make changes in the world. But not only did he bring Buddhism back to India, he left an example of what it means to be an enlightened person. And we who are with the proud Black Buddhist World Association, in our prayer books, we have a prayer for that is inclusive of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. While the Japanese in their religion do not have prayers inclusive of African and African leaders or great bodhisattvas like Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, we were able to bring these type of thinking and this type of enlightenment into it. This is something that's great, and the people at the proud Black Buddhist World Association want to include this sort of thing of bringing an enlightened nature to our society. Thank you very much. Fighting in the world for freedom, justice, and equality, we're the best suited. We are called the Proud Black Buddhists. We're going to put you guys on alert in the 15th chapter of the Sutra, where the Buddhist stoppers on the earth. Them giant suckers who trying to knock us. We are the Black Buddhist stoppers. Dr. King, Malcolm X, and Nelson Mandela were Black Buddhist stoppers. The one that was stopper that come from India. His name was Nichiren Ambedkar. The old name for India is Eastern Ethiopia. From the land of India called Eastern Ethiopia, a great man called Shakyamuni and Buddha. His great teachers was the long-term sutra. The little sutra teaches justice, freedom, and equality. We teach the people how to be free. The teaching of the sutra, we're the best suited. We call ourselves the proud Black Buddhists. Them giant suckers, they're trying to knock us. We are the Black Buddhist stoppers. They're people in India, treated worship like slaves. The people are called Dalits, or called untouchable $10. It is the place where the world's racist culture, where black is at the bottom and they say their brother.